Are you in a position where you're defined by your age, and that's limiting you to pursue a dream or goal you want to accomplish? The More Than Your Age podcast is about having conversations with women who fully live their lives without being dictated or defined by their age. This is a space to encourage women who feel blocked to pursue a dream or goal based on their life circumstances. Welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast. I am your host, Erica Pasvar. Let's start living life fully and become more than your age. I love having this podcast because so far all of my episodes have been people who I know who have been incredibly inspiring to me in some capacity, whether that's the story of some selfless love, self-sacrificing love, grief and how they've handled it, what they've done as far as pursuing some type of dream or goal, which if you've already listened to this podcast, you know. And my guest today is just the same. So she and I met, we were in a small group together at church, and we were the only two single girls in the group and just connected kind of based off of that. And every time I would have a conversation with her, she would just encourage me all the time. I mean, just by her words, her affirmations, just by who she is, she would always just speak the kindest things over me. And when in the midst of meeting her, she was a consultant and decided to own and open up her own business. She was single. She had a lot to potentially lose, but also I knew she wouldn't lose that because she's brilliant and she's a go-getter and she is so kind. And anytime you talk to her, you leave wanting to change the world and inspire and be a better person. And I know that that's how she inspires and works with the people that are her clients. I can't wait for you to listen to my conversation with Kathleen Day and hear how she just came from being a girl who was a consultant from Ohio to owning her own business and killing it. Enjoy the episode. Kathleen Carson, I am so thankful to have you on the More Than Your Age podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Erica.
Absolutely. Kathleen, you are somebody who, whenever I think of a person who doesn't live their life based on their life circumstances, their situation, their age, whatever they may be, you pursue dreams that you have. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted you to come on this podcast. I believe your story, your vision will impact a lot of women. And so I just appreciate you joining the podcast today. And before we kind of get into why we're really talking about you and the business that you've created, you grew up in Ohio, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Go
with
Buckeyes.
A very close knit. And for all of us, we're like, what?
I
know. So you had have a very close knit and supportive family. I would just love for you to share the dynamics of your family growing up in your home.
Yes, thank you. So I grew up with a father that I knew loved me, a mother that loved me, and so I felt like it was a very stable home, right? Both parents in the home, and I am the oldest of 4 children, so grew up really close with my siblings and just felt like I had a really loving, supportive home, back in Ohio. So I feel like that shaped a lot of, who I am today and where I am at in life as well.
What were the careers of your parents?
Yep. So my dad has always been in sales. He was basically in the energy industry, and so he did sales most of his time. Was in management there. First Energy was the company, and now a consultant in energy sales. So very much has that charisma. And so he's in sales, and then my mom was a stay-at-home mom for my whole life. And so I was grateful that they had worked it out. They came to an agreement that this is how they wanted to raise their children. So it was both, a way that both my mom and dad, he was able to provide, and mom was able to stay at home and raise us. And we were very, very involved in all kinds of sports and theater and dance and everything. So I just feel like them as a team, my mom and dad working as a team, really allowed us to have a great childhood and helped develop us into who we are today.
So since your dad was in sales, he's the business one out of the two of them.
Yes.
How did he, or even both of them, instill a desire in you to chase after business?
So that's a really interesting question. I have to say, when you said chase after business, I actually feel like that was part of this journey. Was I was probably chasing things that I thought that I would find identity in. Okay, for example, this might be something new to share with you, but I've always loved being on, when I was in high school, I was the TV reporter for our high school station. I also in college joined the radio station and was a DJ on the weekends. And so I've always loved radio and TV. And really, to me, I feel like God has given me his divine voice, a message to share through voice as my instrument. But I say that because I actually went to school for that in communications. And I decided that when I was going to go off to my professional career, that basically that wasn't going to pay the bills. That when I found out how much a reporter made and how you had to, for the news reporting, you'd have to live at home. And so I was torn because I feel like that was part of what I wanted to pursue, but I actually didn't do that because I felt like, well, I wanted to be financially successful. So I'm going to go, I knew sales from my dad, and this kind of brings it back to my dad. I knew that my dad made really good money in sales. And so that was attractive to me because I saw a little bit of my personality in him. I saw that I was loved people, loved engaging people, loved taking a product I was really passionate about and really getting to the right people and being able to help them with their product or to find a solution to what they were looking for. So I feel like that part of it I saw, but I would actually say that chasing a business, I was chasing the wrong things. I feel like I thought if I did medical device and I knew that medical device was sales, I knew that my dad made good money in sales. So if I did sales, I think I'd be successful because again, like I had some of his personality. And then thirdly, I just felt like, well, medical, when I looked at sales jobs and looked at like who paid really well, it was medical device. So interestingly enough, I actually didn't chase business, and I don't advise chasing something if it's based on a faulty foundation. If it's based on, for a reason, sure, we all need to have provision coming through. A lot of us do. I did at the time. I was on my own, right? To some of the women that is our audience here, I had my own apartment. I wanted to be on my own. I didn't want to be with mom and dad. And so, of course, it's important that you're able to pay the bills. But I would actually say chasing a title and chasing money actually was starting off on the wrong foundation. So I don't advise chasing business. I like to talk more about design and how you're wired, how God created you, what makes you come alive, what drains you, and we can get into some of that. And then knowing that in that there is a destiny, there's a purpose, there's an assignment that you're called to. And so to say all that, I guess I'm just saying that I felt like it kind of, destiny sometimes is something that you discover along the way. And I think there might be some questions that you get to that may help me uncover that a little bit more. But I really feel like to any woman out there, I just would not advise chasing a title, chasing money, because we think that sometimes those are the things that are going to be, well, I will be a success if I have this title. In this case, if I was chasing a business, if I was CEO of a company, well, what happens if you don't do as well as you? Is your identity just going to come crumbling down with that and crashing? And then same too, like if I'm just chasing money, I say meaning is the new money. And so if I'm chasing money, I'm going to be unsatisfied, unfulfilled. And so I think it's more of an attraction versus a chasing.
Well, that's really interesting. And I never knew that you had a desire to go at one point to be a TV reporter or work in radio. So kind of taking us back, where did you go to school, to college?
Yeah, great question. Mountain Union College. It's a Division III private school in the Alliance, Ohio, Canton, Ohio area.
Okay. So you were in school, had at one point this vision of being a reporter, but then said, okay, well, can I really make enough money doing that? Did you still fulfill that, graduate with communications and whatnot, and then that's when you started thinking about the shift?
Absolutely. And this goes back to, as we talked about Christians to Christians out there, where God talks about Romans 8:28, where he can make all things work together for our good. So to answer your question, I did graduate with a communications degree and a business minor. And now I've seen how God has used all those steps along the way to where I'm at today, and how he is using my divine voice. And I believe that there is more to come with that, but also how he's using some of the medical experience and the business experience, which I do love as well. But it's on a different foundation this time. And so I feel like I've come alive. I know who I am. I know what I'm designed to do and where I'm headed. And that brings a sense of fulfillment that I feel like no money could satisfy.
So at this point, when you did graduate and you're having this shift, you eventually land in Dallas. Was that immediately after you graduated? I'd like to hear kind of the steps of what landed you in Dallas to get you to a job that kind of led you to where you are right now.
Great question. So yes, nope, I did not go right to Dallas. I actually, after graduating college in Ohio, I basically got a medical device job. So that is one thing, Erica, I feel like that determination will still, right? I took an internship at the hospital there, and anyways, got a medical device job and did that right there in Ohio. I was actually selling total knees, and total hip replacements at the hospital in Canton, Ohio. So I was there for a little over a year, selling medical equipment there. And then I moved to Indiana and lived in Indiana for a few years, still in medical sales. Then a job opened up with Pfizer. So you guys have probably heard of that too, medical sales as well. Took that job, was there for several years, and then went to Acclarent, which is a Johnson & Johnson company now, but sold medical equipment for ear, nose, and throat doctors. And that is what, after Indiana, basically, a door opened for me to get that job with Acclarent in Oklahoma. So I lived in Oklahoma for a year. And then when the job opened up, same with Acclarent, but in Dallas, Texas, which is where I wanted to be, I was then able to just shift there. So that's how it was, really Ohio to Indiana to Oklahoma to Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Just moving your way on down. I don't think I realized or knew that you had lived in all those different places. I think I just thought you went straight to Dallas, but I was wrong. Well, so when you got to your job in Dallas, and even maybe some of the other jobs, what exactly did your job entail, and how did that develop you as a professional?
So basically how that's helped me today is I really found, as I was in medical device sales, number one, I feel very fortunate and grateful that working for Zimmer, working for Pfizer, and then Acclarent, which became Johnson & Johnson, I felt like I got the best training, really the best training around. So that sales training has helped me with consulting, because in consulting, right, you're selling ideas, you're having to sell yourself, right? And that helps with anything these days, or sell, be able to bring a solution to a problem. And so I would say that training has really helped me in the way that I show up on my calls, and the way that I show up in my training, and the way that I show up with customers, really seeking to understand, really getting to, hey, really what is the root of the problem, or what is their desires and their goals, and then how, if I can meet that, how do we meet that? So I feel like that training has really helped me better understand the sales process. Also with consulting, as you know, you need to be able to really peel back the layers via many questions. It's usually not the surface answer when you're talking to somebody. They know they have this issue, but usually there's something deeper. So I feel like part of that interviewing part part of that, knowing that you need to ask more questions to really get to the root of the issue. I feel like that in training and in the sales process has helped me today with consulting. And so I would say that's, and how to also, we did personality training. So I got to learn different styles, how humans are wired differently, which I go back to, you heard me say creative design, personality, temperament. I believe that we were created on purpose, with purpose. So the way that we were wired is part of, number one, do we understand the way that we're wired? Do we understand what makes us come alive? Do we understand what makes us frustrated? And some of that is in personality assessment and training. I got that there. And that has helped me with not only understanding myself, so self-awareness, knowing what I might be great at, what I may not be good at, and to kind of say no to those opportunities. And then also it helped me better understand people, because a lot of times we try to talk to people in the way that we see from our personality, but we know that people are wired differently. And so understanding other personalities has helped me better build rapport with other people, which I'm still using today.
Oh yeah, I would imagine that completely. I highly enjoy personality tests or anything from Gallup and whatnot. I know there's a lot out there because, like you said, yes, it definitely is necessary in business, but my goodness, in your personal relationships, it affects it greatly. So I think that's a great thing that you took from learning professionally. So at some point in this job of yours, in your consultant job, you had a vision to start something on your own. Walk us through that process of why and how you came up with starting your own business.
Well, I found that it was one of those things where even though I went into medical device sales, I found that there was this role called the MDS role, which is the market development specialist role, which is really what I did with Acclarent, which is now Johnson & Johnson. But when I did that, I found that it's one of those things where when they put me in a situation, so the reps would call me on their top accounts to help grow a medical practice, I just found that when I would go in, it came very natural to me to see maybe where some of the obstacles are, but then also to see a vision of where it could be and to see what they needed to do. And so really that business development niche I found was something that came very easy for me. And it was when some of the device reps said, Kathleen, you're really good at this. I've had managers tell me, reps tell me this, or you really should start your own company and do this, because it was consulting. They brought me in, I'd travel all over the country, and they would bring me on their top accounts. And I found that, I was already consulting in a way, but I was consulting with the company. And so it was really other people opening my eyes to the fact that, because what I find is sometimes our signature strength, or what I call is really kind of the grace of God, the supernatural working in the natural, oftentimes we're like, it is so easy that you don't think it's valuable, or you don't think that it's really that's significant. You just think, I don't know, it's just what I do, right? So sometimes it takes other people opening our eyes to the fact, this is unique. This is special. And they're like, you're one of the best in the company. And I'm only saying that to say that is what opened my eyes to say, wow. And then I did some Google research and realized, wait, consulting's a real thing in healthcare. They hire management companies, consulting companies to come in and help them with grow their practice. And so I saw that it was already an established industry, but I guess my eyes hadn't been opened into it until then. And so then after doing that research, I realized, you know what? Talking about what I feel like when you set goals, not just setting goals for business, but your life goals. And that brings me to why I started the company, is because the only thing, I had so many great things to say about working for these companies, but I was traveling all the time because I would maybe have 15 states that I was covering, right? So I remember it was on Valentine's Day and Hilton honors. At this point, I was like, I'd really like to be in a relationship. I'd really like to be able to kind of travel on my own schedule. And I'm gone all the time. And they sent me up chocolate-covered strawberries to the hotel room and wished me a happy Valentine's Day. And it was Hilton Honors. So I'm just laughing because I'm like, I'm a diamond member, and yet I feel like I have no life. I'm on the road all the time, no love life, no home life. And that's what caused me when it just all kind of clicked from that point. Well, okay, you know what, if I look at life goals and I look at like my goals, is to be, at the time I wasn't married, but to be an amazing wife, to be a mom and have children, to be able to travel. I love to travel. I've traveled to many different places, but to be able to travel on my own schedule versus the company's schedule gone all the time. And so that's what led me to start the company that really fits my life goals. And it works with my design that I feel like God has, I've taken many of these personality assessments. It was like, I feel like your destiny, like there's dots, this assignment is there all along, but it's like when your eyes are open to like, oh, well, this is the way he wired me. And then I'm passionate about it. And also I realize it's easy for me, but maybe not easy for others. And when I'm not doing it, I'm actually like not as happy. I'm not as, I don't feel like I'm as joyful in providing meaningful service. So I feel like all those dots along the way led me to start a consulting and training company for the medical practices. And this is where I say I feel like God has kind of used everything, where I get to speak using my voice, teach using my voice, interview. Discovery calls are all about interviewing the prospect. And so I feel like I get to interview when I go in the healthcare practice. I interview the staff, I interview the doctors, I interview the administrator. So I feel like all of that is being used now. And so I'm really happy that I guess I took that step, and it's really been a joy.
Absolutely. And I think what's really cool about hearing that is you mentioned, when you were working in your previous job, you would have people who would say to you, hey, have you ever thought about doing this on your own? And I love hearing that, because I think you mentioned this too, but oftentimes I feel like when people do step out to jump, to do whatever the next step is for them, and like you said, you're in your own element, you're just thinking, yeah, I'm fine at it. But then when all these other voices are telling you, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this, that's a sign. I mean, I think that's definitely the Lord using those people to say, hey, this is the next path I have you on. Are you going to jump and take it, or are you going to just do what is comfortable for you? And speaking of that, at this specific time for yourself, you were well established. You were earning a great income. Life was good. You had your own place that you were living at. It was a big leap to jump and have to start all over. Like financial security, job security, a place to live, business relationships, like that could have been a lot to lose. So why did you decide to take this leap and risk everything?
Yeah, so I really didn't, to answer your question, I didn't really see any other choice. And what I mean by that is I still had my job, loved my manager, loved who I worked for, loved the leadership there. But inside, I felt like there was a part of me dying, really. So I say like it was more of, I didn't see myself continuing. I'd lay awake at night and I'd feel stuck, and I'd feel like I know there's more, and I'd feel like, I don't know why, but I felt like the grace was leaving. I call it the grace, but just that flow, that it feels like oil, it's an ease. I just felt like there was more of a weightiness to like, I'm supposed to step out into this next thing. And until I do, I was like in this like space of like, I know I should go forward, but I'm not. And I really felt stuck, and I felt like there wasn't a choice but to take that leap, because how I was feeling on the inside at that point, I didn't have the joy, I knew that I was supposed to go do this. And so I just knew that it was time. So I guess that answers that question. And then I will say this, I feel like to anybody out there to take a big leap, I also did some things practically that I felt like, number one, hearing the Lord's voice. I knew that this was not something that I was just chasing. I knew this was something that I felt like was a calling, that was more of like, this is your next assignment. We have assignments in life, but this will also bring you the joy. I feel like we're called to live a good life, and to be able to, so I felt like this was a part of that picture that I could see. And then the practical side of that too was just going, okay, well, I was making great money at the time, but I was saving. When I started to feel this, I'd already had money saved up that would allow me to, for a number of months, really, for a number of months, be able to live on my own, which I was. I had my own apartment right? I wasn't married. I had no other way of income coming in. So I say that to say, and I still had, right, an apartment that I needed to pay for in Dallas. I still needed groceries, all that stuff. So I would say the big leap, yes, taking the step out. But as far as the financial thing that helped me was, I believe God's calling me this way, but I'm going to, to anybody out there, I had savings. So I felt like I wasn't just going from, and I'll just say this, wasn't just going from $150,000 a year to zero in one day. Like I felt like, yes, it was a risk in that. I think I'm just going to get real here. I feel like unless the Lord is calling you, to go from 150, let's say, a year to no income coming in is significant. So is there a big risk? Yes. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring this real here. Like, yes, after that paycheck, it was done, right? But I knew that there was more. And so all along I'd been saving to be able to invest in the business, to be able to provide living expenses, because I felt like that was God's provision for that season. But now I'm stepping into the new season, and now I saw God provide for me all along.
You mentioned that you had to save for several months. Did you, at what point when you knew that you wanted to take this jump to start your business, at what point before you quit your job did you start saving? And then was it to last you for 5 to 6 months, or was it a full year? Do you have more of those actual numbers? Do you remember?
So I want to say that, I guess to answer your question first, I've always saved, if that makes sense. So I felt like savings was always a part of my life. But I feel like for this big jump, I wanted to make sure, so I did have about almost a full year's worth. So when it was anywhere between, I would want to say between 6 months and a year, but almost a year's worth. So that's just what I felt led to have. So.
Yeah, actually, yes. I think it was yesterday I was reading a business magazine about people who are wanting to make the leap to start their own business. And I guess a business financial expert recommended that if you're wanting to do that, make sure that you save up to like a full year just in case. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good. And then I thought, oh, well, I'm going to see what Kathleen did.
Well, and let me tell you, that was wise. That was very wise. And I feel like what he said, because I ended up needing, if you're starting a business, you're going to learn early on in the way. There's going to be some things that, okay, these are a home run, but there's other things that aren't, where I've made a mistake. I now have to pay out of pocket. If I didn't have that savings, how was I going to make it right with the customer? And, for example, I'll just give an example. I made a mistake on one of the print materials. And so but I knew it was my issue, right? So I needed to make it right. That's part of great customer service, even if it cost me. And in that case, this was my first client. It was $6,000, So I'm just trying to share that, where it's like, if I didn't have that savings to tap into, then all of a sudden I'm not getting my foot off, on a right start. So you're going to make mistakes along the way. That's part of the risk. And so having some savings for those situations to happen, so you can still do the right thing by the customer, but then also to live on, is wise.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, you felt that you were called to take this jump, and then also you saved financially. What other steps did you have to take in order to get this business up and running? Kind of some practical steps.
So I would say, saving financially. Do we want to go into, when you say like practical steps, can you tell me more about, are we talking about opening up the LLC, coming up with your brand? All those things, or are you talking about, if you can just give me some clarity on that?
Well, sure. Like, did you have to hire a coach? How did you know to open up an LLC? Like, where did you, did you feel stuck? Did you have people to talk to? Was it a lot of research on your own? Because oftentimes I feel like when people do want to start something, they have zero idea where to begin, and that's scary. And so what kind of were some of those just beginning steps to get this business up and running when you really had no idea?
So great question. I hired a coach. And I hired a coach. Her name is Marshawn Evans Daniels. I hired a coach that was where I wanted to be. She was already a speaker. She was already a trainer. She was already a consultant. And she was, she was already doing what I did. So I hired her. Hence some of the savings came into, investing in a coach that was already where I wanted to be and had the fruit, of that. And then she had a coaching program. It was a 12-month coaching program that literally walked me through everything. She helped me come up with start the business, establish it, basically come up with a brand name. So we did strategy days, and she helped me really know how to put this all together, including she helped me put together my coaching programs and packages and what problems we were going to solve. And so that was the key piece right there.
That's great. Because, I think, I hear a lot, and I don't know if it's much more now just because social media throws it at you, or maybe they throw it at me because they know the things that I enjoy. But I see a lot more of coaching opportunities as a business. And so I think that that's great for you to mention that. Would you suggest that if someone were to start their own business to invest in a coach, or maybe just depends on what they're starting?
100%. I honestly don't know. It really accelerated. Accelerates the journey. So, and it does keep you from making, I think I would have made a lot more mistakes if I didn't have her who'd already walked it out to show me the path.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So as you've been along this journey, or your business, did you ever question, even though I know you said, I know God, this is where the Lord has me. Did you ever question if this was actually, were you doing the right thing?
Yes. Absolutely. There was no hesitation there. And that's where I think the excitement, you're like, okay, you feel the tug. I call it the tug. You're excited, you start, but when you start your own business, and I go back to this, the value of identity. I didn't understand how much that meant. I'd heard about it in the church life, but I don't know if I really had I call it a revelation of that, if I really had a deep foundation on that. Because what'll happen is, all of a sudden when things don't go right, you've got those wins. But I think sometimes, for me, I was a lot harder on myself than others. And that was something that the Lord had to show me, is that, yes, you're taking risks, but I was hard on myself. And so then what happens? That you beat yourself up. Then you look at your self-esteem. And now it's harder to go out and pitch yourself, or, to the right people that you can help, because you have doubts. You have self-doubt. You are questioning, okay, well, if this was God's plan and calling, why am I having some of these challenges come up? But then I learned we're not called to an easy life. Part of the destiny, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be challenges, and it requires his faith. You know what that did? It caused me to press in closer. Hey, God, remind me who you said I am. I needed to hear, I needed to really understand the Father's love and his affirmation. One of my favorite scriptures is when, it wasn't until later in Jesus' life that he heard the Father, the heavens opened up, and he heard him say, you are my beloved son. So family, you're my father, right? I'm a daughter. In whom I love. So is my foundation in the Father's love? Is my security in the Father's love? Or is it in this business? Because you will crumble. And I did, when something happened. And then I needed to hear him affirm me. Because see, other people can start to see where some of your strengths are, and God will use that to help. But if I am relying on their affirmation, then one client who maybe didn't agree with what your counsel was, or maybe, didn't want to go through with the service. Let's just call it, if my affirmation is based on whether they like my product or service or not, and trust me, when you're starting a new company, that gets really close to the heart, because you're like, this is something a product I built, a service and you can take on some of that identity. And so that rejection is hard if they choose not to go with your program. Does that make sense? So I feel like that caused self-doubt. It caused esteem, but then I just heard the Father really bring me back to his heart of love to, that I'm really a daughter in his kingdom. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're secure in my love. And then that he's well pleased with me. Faith pleases him. He says that. Faith pleases him. So kind of be reminded of stepping out and taking risk, doing what I feel like he called me to do is like, it's bringing pleasure to the Father. So I kind of have to continue to go back to that of my value is not in my product. My value is not in my title of CEO. My value is not in the service I offer. Sure, it helps solve a problem for mankind, but my value has to be, my identity is in being a child of God, being a daughter of God, being loved by him, and that he loves and is a rewarder of faith and stepping out and taking those risks on what he called you to do. So in a long-winded way, I feel like that has to be solid. And sometimes it just gets exposed when you're starting something, right? And so it was one of the best things that could have really happened to me, because I feel like until it was exposed, I didn't realize how much I was chasing and how much I had put my identity in these other things.
Yeah, I think that's really important that you mentioned that, because it's so easy when we do, like you said, you're CEO, you've created this product, and if someone doesn't like it or they are upset with how you presented it or whatnot, that can be very soul crushing. And if you don't know who you are, that can lead to a business destruction. And so I'm very glad that, although those moments have happened, that you haven't just lived on those words or, the rejection, because that could be very detrimental. So thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. So, how many years now has it been since you've owned the business?
It's been 5 years. And then I would say 15.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 years since I've owned the business, 15 years in the medical space as a whole.
Okay, so now after you've been owning it for 5 years, where do you hope that your business takes you as you look down the road?
Great question. So I would say I've been training someone that could step in and really duplicate what I do, to kind of give the freedom of being able to maybe step away longer or more. And so I feel like it's just that discipling aspect of it. And I would say too, more of, I do feel like what we're doing today, I would like to do more of the, I feel like God is going to use more of my voice as well, his voice speaking through me in podcasting, in speaking engagements. And so, yeah.
Well, and you've touched a little bit about what your company is. Can you share a little bit more so that people who don't really, they know it has something to do with medical field, but do you mind just sharing a little bit about it? Because I think it's a very unique business that is necessary in the medical field.
Thank you. Yeah. So what we tell, so we feel called to entrepreneur physicians, right? So these are doctors who also had a dream that God placed in their hearts and wanted the freedom to start their business, right? To have their own private practice. That's who we feel called to. That's who we feel called to help. And so with that, what we share with them is that we really help them attract their ideal patients and increase their profits. How we do that is really through management, is through looking at the customer experience. We provide customer service training. We look at, we give evaluations to see maybe if there's gaps in their service that are causing maybe some mismanagement, but also causing the patient to not have a great experience. And we come in and we help identify that, and we help basically solve that for them. And what that does is it allows them to become more profitable. When they're attracting the ideal patients that they enjoy, they go to school for, they maybe invest in certain areas because that makes them come alive. Because they say, Kathleen, I would love to be able to see more of these patients. It makes me come alive. I love the transformation I can bring that patient. How do I do more of that? That's the question we get asked. So I feel like that's part of helping them with their dream and their destiny, and to do it in a Christ-centered way. And that is really taking care of people, patient-centered. How do we give them great service, right? Great service where they feel loved, they feel honored, all the way through the medical process, which we know isn't always how they feel or the case, and which is why it really actually made me super upset, and I wanted to be a part of fixing it. because I felt like everybody, my family included, my friends were like, this is horrible. You know, you call, you can't get an appointment. When you're there, they're rude. When you need to get tests, you never get calls back. I mean, maybe to some of you guys, this sounds familiar. And I just heard it over and over again. And I'm like, well, somebody should do something about it. Somebody should do. Every other industry is held to providing great customer service, right? We like to go to restaurants where there's great reviews online, where, you know, the hostess is warm and inviting and friendly, where everything from my first experience in the door all the way through to how I was treated at the table, to my dinner itself, and then, you know, leaving the restaurant, that it was a great experience. So we help do that. And we also help with the management side. And, you know, God talks a lot about stewardship and management. And so how are they managing what they already have in their practice? We help them do that better. And that helps them be more profitable and continue to employ more jobs, right? And continue to reinvest in their staff, all those things.
Oh yeah. I love your business, because oftentimes, you know, my friends and I, whoever, you know, the medical field, although it's medicine, it's still a business, like you said, and word of mouth is huge. So the friends were talking, okay, where's your pediatrician? Do you like him or her? What about your OB? What about your gynecologist? What about your family practitioner? And then you hear people say, oh, well, they're rude. They don't ever pay any attention to you. I felt like the doctor just came in and out, like I'm just a number to that person. And I'm like, send them to Kathleen. They need to get in her program or do whatever, you know, like, because I mean, it really does affect it. And I have so many friends who are in the nursing, I mean, in the medical field too, but a lot who are nurses who just talk and explain how the environment is horrible, and how the doctors treat them poorly, and everyone's miserable. And when patients walk in, it's just like there's this aura of anger happening. And you don't want that. So we need you. We need you, and multiply. Let's get that girl, guy, whoever you're hiring, ready to go so we can duplicate this.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I have to say it's great, because I do, you know, it was one of those things that when we look at like starting something, right? A lot of your listeners who are maybe like, I feel like I should do this. You know, it does start, we're called to serve a need. We're called to serve to fix a problem, to be a solution to somebody's problems. But we all know that we're called to different problems, right? Not all of us feel a heartstring to go help that particular thing that we just talked about, right? It might be frustrating, but like I found that when I heard it from you, friend, and I heard it from so many of my family members, and I started listening to calls. I started literally on the customer service on the phones at multiple practices. I just wanted to learn about the patient experience. I wanted to learn how they're first. And that's when I got to see it. And I just was like, something's wrong. And I felt like it was a part of the process that God wanted me to help fix. And I felt like it was the problem that I was called to help be a solution for. And so, you know, I encourage your listeners to kind of listen, not only when you're listening for that tug and what makes you light up and what you're passionate about, also look at like when this isn't done right, what really stirs my heart? What makes me really upset? What makes me say this is not okay anymore? And, you know, I may be one person starting out, but I want to be a part of bringing this impact and this change. And so really listening for that, and whatever you feel you're called to, or your industry, you know, that's really important when you're starting a business, and that there's an actual problem that you feel called to solve.
Well, so you kind of answered my next question, but if you have anything else to add on, I want to hear what you have to say. So let's say someone is tinkering with this idea to start a business, but they're focusing on the what ifs or the fears, you know, whether they believe in God or not. What would you suggest they do to get started to counter those fears?
So I like to call those the limiting beliefs, the lies, right? And I would say to capture those fears, it's to, number one, be aware of what those are. I had to face them. I could not live in denial of them. And so, you know, for me, it was prayer and asking Jesus, right? Asking the Holy Spirit to reveal what those are, because these are real ones. But let's say you don't know Jesus or the Holy Spirit. I pray that you do get to know him, but he's great. But if not, like, you can pick up some business books, and a lot of what you find in human behavior, some of these are all the same. The fear of failure, the fear of success, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being a fraud. I mean, these are real things that I think if you pick up, and I can't think of a book right now off the top of my head, but if you pick up just some business books that have psychology to it, a lot of those fears are the same for all humans. And I feel like kind of really just getting honest. Let it be a self-assessment, search your heart. Okay, which of these am I not wanting to face because they're real? And I think the more that you don't acknowledge, number one, it's being aware. A lot of that stuff is in your subconscious. So you're not aware that you have that fear a lot of times. And so it takes either somebody saying, hey, I think the reason you're not doing this is because you're afraid of this. So listening to love, being open to feedback from loved ones that you trust, that are a safe place, to maybe point out what maybe they see as some obstacles, but being open, right? Sometimes we don't want to be open with what other people see clearly as an obvious reason of why you're stuck. And then also there's just books that literally go through the psychology of these are some of the same core fears that every human faces, and just coming face to face with them. So that's, I guess, the first way is to identify it, right? And to face it.
Yeah, that's huge. The fear is just the biggest thing of, what about this and this and this and this and this and this and this? And it can stop you from pursuing anything you want to do. Well, one more question for you, and this is the one that I typically ask everybody, and so I'd love to hear your response for that. If you could encourage one woman who feels limited based on her current season in life, what advice would you give?
So I would start with writing down what those limitations are, right? Do you feel capped in your growth development? That would be a limitation. Do you feel like maybe you don't have the lifestyle that you want? Is that the freedom? Okay, maybe case in point would be like, do I want to have some kind of business that I could work at home? Because I feel like I don't have that freedom and I want that for being a wife, for my family. So, what are those limitations? Really write them down. Is it freedom? Is it the lifestyle? Is it a financial? I feel capped here. And being real, like, hey, this particular job pays X, Y, Z. That's industry standard. It's everywhere. So getting real and saying, if I feel limited financially, then I need to find a different pond that maybe I can still use my same passion, my skills, but go do that. And in this case, a business, if it is the case, like this, for example, in consulting, it allowed me to see, yeah, you can expand, you can grow not only your skills, you can grow financially, but also you can have the time freedom that I wanted, and to be able to really do business on my schedule that worked with my lifestyle and worked with my personal goals and my family. And so really, I would just say, look at those limitations, write them down. And then based on that, start going to town, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to get unstuck? And really taking that time, that limiting beliefs. A lot of our limitations, we think they're the external situation. But if I listened to that voice, I would have never have stepped out into something that I felt God was calling me to do, because it sounds like good excuses. It really sounds like that was a well-planned, and so I say that because we really have limiting beliefs. And sometimes, for me, I think inner healing, I call it cleaning out the heart junk. Hey, what limitations do I, what wrong beliefs, right? What wrong, for example, hearing, oh gosh, I didn't think that my words mattered, that they were weighty, that maybe they could impact somebody's life. So maybe I wasn't speaking, and yet I knew God was calling me to speak. So I had to literally, replace that lie, notice that was a limitation from me going out and speaking, and replace it with the truth. And so I just think that you have to get real honest, and that requires vulnerability. I think that's the biggest thing. I think people don't, I know for me, to get quiet with yourself, and for me it's prayer, right? Asking God to get quiet and to be real. Why have I felt this tug? Why am I not stepping out? Help me to identify the lies that I'm believing, because I either know them or I don't know them. Help me to face them. And then I think when we talked about the fears and those limitations, also having a bigger why. If we don't have a big enough why, we're doing what we're doing to step out. You know, making a difference in what way? I want to make a difference. I hear people, in what way do you want to make a difference? If we don't have a bigger why, I want to be able to be at home with my kids and still do what I love, and I want to have a baby. You know, if I don't have a big enough why, then sometimes those fears keep me stuck because that's all I see instead of seeing the bigger why, having that bigger why be my motivation. And I say that's, you know, calling, purpose, destiny, but also some of these other things that I just talked about. So I guess that would be my answer.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. I think those are good takeaways to jot down those limitations, address those, jot down those fears, talk with your loved ones to say, hey, what are you seeing as well? Because I think you're 100% right. Once you address those and tackle those and then understand why do you want to pursue whatever it may be. It can be business, it can be some type of activity that you're just scared, like address those and then it can help you move forward. So thank you so much, Kathleen. I just appreciate you sharing your story, sharing what you started and what you're doing. And I'm excited to see where it takes you down the road, especially with your potential new endeavors that you have as well. And I will put in the show notes your website so that people, if they know of a medical practice that could use your service or want to reach out to you, they can do that. So thank you again, Kathleen, for joining the More Than Your Age podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Erica. Be blessed.
Bye.
Bye.